I'm going to kick it off now with millennials. So why even write a book about millennials? And the reason is, I just mentioned, they are our new buyer today. The thing that I want to leave you with is the biggest difference between Gen Xers and baby boomers and millennials is 1994. They were 13 years old. A millennial Gen was born between 91 and 97. In 1994, the internet came out, the Netscape browser, and that changed everything. And that's having massive transformational effects on our society, right? 6 of the largest 10 companies in the world wouldn't exist without the internet. So wrote the book addressing this issue, and I'm going to tell you, there's 40 million millennials right now in the workplace. And I'm going to tell you, these numbers are staggering because their habits are so different and they're increasing every single day. The reason I said millennials are not aliens is 2 reasons. One, I learned when you write a book, you have to have some level of a provocative title. And then also, it just talk to a baby boomer. If you talk to a millennial, they do believe they're aliens. Okay, they believe they came from a different planet, and they believe they're entitled. So I'd say to a baby boomer, I'm like, that's great. What was your nickname of your generation? Do you remember? And they kind of pause and like, the me generation. So if you don't get that title if you're not somewhat entitled, if you will. So the millennials and all the generations essentially have their own good, the bad, the ugly. This group just grew up on the internet, and they have very different habits because of that. Massive buying power. These numbers are just huge, right? 600 billion today, going to $1 trillion by 2025. So in 5 years, 3 out of 4 workers will be millennials. And they have very different, so for instance, I'll give you for instance, if you don't have Slack right now at your company and you have a bunch of millennials, they probably are clamoring for it, or you better watch out, right? They want tools that look like their personal life. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. 15% of millennials are now in management positions. There's no shot in the investment management industry that we have 15% of millennials running investment management firms right now. Thus, we're stuck with the marketing that we have. Think about our websites, think about our content. For 20 years, we've been marketing with email and PDFs. There's just no way that's going to be able to survive and persist with the millennial generation. They will demand greater access to information without initially having to talk to us. And I believe that's one way how we're going to be able to get greater market penetration as a group of boutique investment managers. 87% of millennials are starting to take on management roles versus roughly 38% for Xers and boomers. So it's growing. Look, millennials never walked the aisles of a Blockbuster, right, like a lot of us did. They've only ever known Netflix. They've never called a Barnes & Noble to see if a book is in stock. If you just really want to freak a millennial out, or even a Gen Z, which are my kids' age, under 21, ask them if they ever thought about calling Amazon to see if a book was in stock. They won't even laugh. They'll just look like you're weird and they want to get away from you. This was kind of me growing up in high school, right? You have a 50-foot phone cord up to your room. Today, all the millennials have smartphones plugged in next to their beds, and they can get whatever they want at any time without talking to anyone. That's not the investment business, by the way. They're all over their phone 45 times a day. I laugh. That's so far off base. Just go to any Starbucks or walk through an airport, right? It's probably more like 150 times a day. They generally don't hang out in libraries except for certain circumstances. They never went to a camera store to get film developed because of the iPhone. Wikipedia, that's what they're finding. Now one thing, and so this is where they go to get all their information traditionally, okay? Couple things. This is now becoming the second place a millennial goes to learn about a product. And this is scary. The number one place they go now to search and learn about a product is this. So start thinking about our business, right? And how little video we do, right? So little, and so little informational video. We can actually learn something about an investment strategy. You simply can't. T-Row has like videos, but it's like music's playing in the background, it's showing a Bloomberg screen. I mean, a due diligence analyst anywhere is not getting any value from that. And so over time, we're going to have to, I understand there's compliance issues, which we've dealt with, but video is everything. And social networks, how they live and how they exist is Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's all about social networks, and that's only increasing. So start to think about the workplace and you guys and us employing millennials. So I was just talking to Bill Harding. For instance, if you have millennials that work for you, okay, you have to socially enable them. Otherwise, they're not going to want to work for you. So right here, 56% of millennials accept jobs that, from a social media standpoint, they need to have social media apps. Their personal life, this is the big takeaway from the book. The millennials' personal life is on one side. They get up in the morning, everything's fully automated on their phone. They can get whatever they want to eat. They can get from Starbucks or Uber Eats or whatever it is. They can check their account balance. They can check the sports scores, everything. Then they go to work, and the personal life is fully automated. They go to work, and their work life is not automated at all. And they're not doing any, and employers are not doing enough to be able to enable this generation. I'm going to promise you, it's not about yoga, it's not about foosball and all that stuff. It's about social media, and it's about efficiency of communication. That's all it is. Unfortunately, outside of Bloomberg and the numbers, from a qualitative standpoint, our business is stuck in the dark ages as it relates to efficiency of information. And this is the stat that you guys have to know. They turn over, not at our firm, right? Our millennials run the firm, right? But they have long-dated relationships with us because we enable them to do what they want to be able to do. And I'll tell you, what you're going to need to think about is this workplace. So recently I was at a conference this week, happened to do with the book, and they talked about what's going to be the biggest transformation at Google in the next 20 years to some Google employees. Oh, it's going to be the virtual workforce. Millennials want to work from where they want to work from. They don't want to always have to come in the office. So if you're employing millennials, you're going to have to start thinking about that and being okay with it. They want work-life balance, and they want to work on the weekends, they want to play on the weekends. This is another thing, video enabled. So 87% would prefer going to work for a firm that's video enabled. So you're starting to think about what is your firm doing around video. They'll bring their own apps to work. So they will closetly use their own apps even if the company bans them, just as an FYI. That's how much they depend upon them. That's how important it is to them. So for you guys in the audience, as you're starting to hire more and more millennials, you really have to be thinking about these types of behaviors, if you will. I do not believe they're bad behaviors because they've been driven by the internet and technology, and it's only moving in that direction, and the next generation after them is even worse. I'll give you one line. My son, I was leaving a voicemail for my mom, his grandmother, he's 14 or 15, and he looked up to me, and I'm leaving the voicemail, and he goes, Dad, he goes, I don't think I've ever left a voicemail in my life. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's the reality of this generation. They're not as much talkers as they are texters. They'd rather, if they had social media freedom, they would take that over a salary increase. I mean, it's nuts, right? So let's start talking video, because I really want to make sure you guys know this. This is a number that, if I said guess it, and then times it by 100, you probably still wouldn't get here. But this is a YouTube stat I pulled off the internet. 5 billion videos watched per day on YouTube. And 88% more time on a website if it has video. So think about our industry again, coming back to us. There's no video anywhere on anything relevant. And we all blame compliance, but that's really, you can successfully get around compliance by being compliant, is my point. But that's a scary thing if you're trying to sell to a millennial and you want to relate to them. And then if all of a sudden these bigger firms that we're all competing against start creating this, it puts us again at a bigger and bigger disadvantage, which I'll be talking about. You're seeing the increase, how much people watch videos every day and every week. It's just increasing, increasing, and increasing. This is definitely something that I've seen in our firm, where if I send a PDF, it doesn't get read. If I were to send a video of the same information, this stat's saying it's 3 times as likely to get read by a millennial. So almost 50% of millennials will only watch a video on their smartphone. So you start to think about an investment firm's mobile strategy and how mobile enabled is your content, right? Just other things to think about. It's kind of crazy where this is going. This is probably my favorite stat because I lived it with my son a couple years ago. He's 18 now. He's like 14 or 15. Had to do something in the backyard, like remove a tree or something, and there's a bobcat out there. And I look out, and he's in the bobcat, okay, on YouTube, pressing how to start a bobcat, and starting the bobcat. I'm like, right, but the middle one there says, in the last 2 years, there's been a 12x increase in the number of how-to videos. 12x increase. I mean, that's mind-numbing. So essentially, anything that a millennial or a Gen Z wants to get, and I'm sure that you guys are the same way, their brain goes to, let me go to YouTube and see how it's done. And it really doesn't matter what it is. You know, if you're on a date, if you wanted to make a certain dish, that's what it's like, hey, I didn't know how to make this, so I just YouTubed it and made it right there. So, the problem that we have is that more and more of the DDAs are who we're facing off with, which I started with. And they're inundated with meeting requests. So how can we, as a group, get better at getting them information where they can learn about us without necessarily having to take that initial meeting, and then it can end up being the follow-up meeting. There's no doubt in my mind if Amazon created $1 trillion business around content and creating content and not having to talk to a salesperson, the investment business will get there. But I just think we just have to just get better at this, and it doesn't take that much effort because we've done it. So you want to, the call to action number one is make their business life much more like their personal life. And then second takeaway is let them learn about you without necessarily having to talk to you. So, and that's really the millennial way. So here's the conclusion. So video, and it really comes down to freedom. The internet and technology have given millennials freedom. And that's the real takeaway. It's much more about freedom, whereas I'm 52 years old. If you think about the World War II generation that ran all the business in the 50s and 60s, command and control, all of that hierarchy, it's all being just, essentially torn apart, if you will, because of technology. I will tell you this, millennials are an insanely social generation, insanely social, but they are also very efficient with their communication. And I would say they'd rather text versus talk, they'd rather watch versus read. And so we just have to make sure we're aware of that and start adapting our behavior to their habits.